So I'm just going to go over how to write data to a JSON file. I've just got set up a REST API and it's using Express. The first part of the video is just going to be creating a function to save our data. And the second part will be adapting that function so we can pass in different JavaScript objects and save it to different JSON files. The first thing that we're going to want to do is just grab hold of our FS modules. So FS require FS. We're going to want to create our function. Just going to call it save data. And then at the moment, I'm going to pass through dog, the JavaScript dog object, because that's what I'm going to be saving the first time. So we've got our JavaScript object, and then we want to change that to into JSON format, and we do that with json.stringify. And then we pass through our dog object. We're going to want to bind this to a variable. I'm going to call that const JSON data. And then just so you can see the difference, if I console .log both of these, not console ever, console log. And the first console log will be our JavaScript object, and the second one will be our JSON data. Just going to call our function and pass in dog and run this in the terminal. So as you can see at the first line, we've got our JavaScript object, and then the second line, we've got our JavaScript object, but it's in a JSON format. And this is the data that we're going to want to be saving. So, I do know the shortcut to that. So in order to save this data, we need to use fs.writefile. And the first argument that we're going to be passing through is where are we saving this? So I'm going to be saving the data to dogs.json, to dog.json. The file doesn't exist, but it will just create the file for me. The second argument is what data do we want to save? So I want to save my JSON data. And finally, the third argument is you pass through a function which will catch the error, and it will prevent the save from happening. So I'm going to call the function finished. Within the save dog function, I'm going to create another function called finished, and I'm going to want to pass through error. So if an error occurs, so if error, I want to see this error, so console.error, and then error, and finally return. So what return does is, if there is an error, it prevents the data from being saved. So it completely backs you out of the fs.writefile. And then you can go to your console, see what the error is, and try and fix it. So there we go. We've got our function. It catches any error, and it prevents the save from happening if there is an error. It changes our JavaScript object into a JSON format, and then it saves. So we've already got the function called at the bottom. If I restart my server, you'll see the JSON file being created. And then within this JSON file, we've got our JSON data. It's not in a very nice format. So if we go down to json.stringify and we pass in two more arguments, the second one can be null and the third one can be 2. If I restart my server, you'll see that the actual format of this JSON file is so much more nicer and more readable. It's very helpful if you've got a lot of data. So as I was saying, the second part of this video is just going to be me changing this function so you can just constantly call the same function but save different JavaScript objects to different JSON files. Because if we wanted to save our JavaScript cat object, instead of rewriting this whole object again, what we can do is if we pass through data and say the file, so data file, so the data here that we want to save is the, at that time it was the dog object, but if I just change that to data, and then the same for the file here, so the file that we was originally doing was dog.json, but if I pass file there, and then in our save data function, the first argument would be the data, which is dog, and then the second one is the file, which is dog.json. But let's just, for now, say, I don't know, second dog.json. And then we want to call the function again. So save data, and we want to save our cat. So we want to pass in the cat object, and let's call it, I don't know, very creative, cats.json. Let's make sure it's in a string format, cat.json, and if we just reload our server, as you can see, we've got our cat.json, our cat.json file created with our data saved as well, and the same with our second dog.json. It's got the same data, but it's just in a different file. So that's it.